Yep, I'm great. I'm good.
Add a little color between the two.
Yes, very nice. Well, a little bit.
Yeah, no,
Little
you,
bit.
you did your part.
Yep. Okay, good afternoon, folks, and I'm proud to be joined by my colleagues, Senators Merkley, Warren, Baldwin, Blumenthal, and Wyden, and thank them for joining me in standing up against tax cuts for billionaires and for fighting for working families. That's what we're doing. So today, the Senate Republicans will vote to move forward with a budget resolution that will decimate Medicaid, housing, veterans, SNAP, and more, all in pursuit of tax cuts for their billionaires club. We will highlight the devastating Trump tariff tax, all to help the billionaires as well. And since they don't want to tell you how much this will cost, allow me. If passed, this will add $37 trillion to the national debt. That's more than double the totality of our national debt today. And I find this very interesting because some of the same senators have had very deep concerns about the debt not too long ago and are now on board with this reckless, irresponsible plan. Let me give you a couple of quotes. I have a whole bunch, but I'm only doing two. Senator Thune, we need to start tackling this debt, and we need to start doing it now. Senator Cruz, debt is out of control, and it's jeopardizing the future for our kids. I've got two little kids, and the idea of handing them a $16 trillion debt I think is immoral. So what does he think of $37 trillion if 16 is immoral? Now, American families are going to be screwed by these cuts, not to mention the higher costs they'll be saddled with because of the crippling Trump tariff tax coming our way. We welcome the opportunity to have this debate in the open for all Americans to see. So tonight, Senate Democrats will do everything in our power to do what Republicans won't do, fight for American families. People are going to see who's on whose side. They are for the billionaires. We are for American families. And under the Republican plan, families lose, billionaires win. That could sum up the whole fight very, very succinctly. So tonight we'll focus during debate time on preserving Medicaid. Tomorrow we'll continue with preventing tax cuts for billionaires, protecting veterans and national security, exposing corruption within the administration, defending Social Security, and stopping the seemingly never-ending rise of costs to American families, highlighted by the Trump tariff tax. Tonight, you'll see our caucus forcing votes, fighting for American families, and asking Republicans where they stand and who exactly they're fighting for. And on top of gutting essential programs, as much as we saw in the budget that's been revealed, their proposal that's been revealed in the last few days, yesterday, and I'll focus on the tariffs here, yesterday the president made one of the dumbest decisions in history, one that will negatively impact every single American family, every single one. He's walking us into the dumbest and most avoidable recession probably in history. And let's call the Trump tariff tax for what they really are, a huge tax hike on American families. And not just any tax hike, J.P. Morgan called it, quote, the equivalent to the largest tax increase in since 1968. Here's what Bloomberg said, quote, roughly $2 trillion was erased from the S&P 500 at the start of U.S. trading on Thursday, amid worries that President Donald Trump's sweeping new round of tariffs could plunge the economy into a recession. And it claims more than 80% of the companies in the S&P were trading lower. Stock market is plummeted, retirement savings are tanking, consumer confidence is falling, consumer expectations for the future are historically low, companies are already announcing layoffs. I saw Stellantis just knocked off was going to fire 800 people, lay them off. All for these the Trump tariff tax. All for that, so they can have more money to reduce taxes on the billionaires, the average American family is going to pay more for everything. For food, for gas, for cars, for groceries, for clothing, for beer, for you name it. It makes no sense. And the bottom line is that they're not fighting for American families. They're just aiding and abetting what they're doing and making it even worse with the Trump tariff tax. They even decided that they would tax penguins.
What?
Because their 2 islands are included. I forgot the names of the islands. They're not here. Not Greenland. There are 2 islands that were included that only have penguins on them. But they were included in the Trump tariff tax.
Get those penguins.
Right. But that shows how haphazard, how sloppy, how careless they are. And one final thing here. This Trump administration is run by a group of billionaires. They're in a billionaire bubble. These billionaires don't have any understanding of what the American family is going through and how much worse it will be with the Trump budget and with the Trump tariff tax. They're just isolated. They don't understand. They're mean. They're nasty. They're uncaring. And we, tonight and tomorrow, are going to show the American people just who they are. Senator Merkley.
Thank you very much, Leader Schumer, and to my colleagues who are going to lay out some of the specific points. But let's understand this. Republican plan is simply 4 words. Families lose, billionaires win. They want to cut programs for families in health care and housing and education, things that help create a living wage job, $1.5 to $2 trillion. What? To fund more tax giveaways to the very richest Americans. It's a great betrayal, certainly, of the American family. And in the process, they're going to put an enormous burden on the generations to come. $37 trillion is the bottom of what the range might be that their bill will cost. $37 trillion. You know, our current GDP, annual amount we produce each year, is only around $30 trillion. They want to put additional debt of $37 trillion. Or let's look at the current debt. In 249 years since our independence, we have run up a debt is just shy of $37 trillion. That's how big, in one decision, one bill, in 1 year, they want to increase the burden on the generations to come. This is really sickening. The economists point out that that burden will reduce the economy in the future, that it will raise interest rates in the future, that that burden will reduce the ability to have the foundations for families to thrive in the future. It's so sickening. Every one of my Republican colleagues who has talked about fiscal responsibility should rush to the bathroom and throw up in the toilet. That's how sickening this situation is with additional debt. Now, we've heard about a magic wand called Section 312. Section 312, interesting, has never, ever, in the history of our country, ever been used on a reconciliation bill. Never used. It's only been used on narrow anomalies in regular spending bills to solve naughty little problems of estimate. It is a completely inappropriate vessel to use just by precedent, but also recognize that in reconciliation there are explicit instructions called the Byrd Rule on how you estimate the impact of debt, the impact of any policy option or any revenue option on the amount of deficits that will be created. Those explicit instructions are ones that we will turn to when we get to the reconciliation bill. Section 312, totally inappropriate. There are 3 pillars that came in 1974. Realize back then we were adding about 6 billion, not trillion, 6 billion to our debt each year. 6 billion in deficit. And folks said, oh my goodness, this is so high. Let's do a couple things. Think about these 3 pillars. No reconciliation bill can produce any additional debt in a 10-year period. In fact, it has to reduce the deficit. Second of all, in any given year after the first 10, it cannot increase the deficit. Third pillar, We have to have honesty. No smoke and mirrors, no gimmicks. That honesty means we're going to create the Congressional Budget Office and we're going to use those nonpartisan estimates. Back in 1996, the Republicans struck down the first pillar and said you can, in those first 10 years, you can increase the deficits. Now today, they're striking down the second pillar, saying no deficits year by year after the first 10 years, and the third pillar, that is the use of nonpartisan numbers generated by CBO. If you care anything about fiscal responsibility, you would be a hell no on this bill. Fiscal responsibility is being thrown overboard. You know, they have a plan, families lose, billionaires win. We have a plan too. Families win and billionaires pay their fair share.
Thank you, Jeff. Senator Baldwin on Medicaid.
Medicaid. So good afternoon. As you've already heard from my colleagues, Republicans are going to try every which way to hide their plans that will create new tax base for the wealthiest and pay for it by cutting Medicaid. We are going to watch Republicans tie themselves in knots to somehow say they are not cutting Medicaid and ripping the rug out from our families. But they will not be able to escape the truth. The truth here, and more importantly, the truth our constituents will feel, is that this Republican budget plan will cut Medicaid to the bone and take health care from children, from people with disabilities, from seniors, and from our most vulnerable. You've all heard the numbers. 72 million Americans, 8 million seniors, a third of all children rely on Medicaid for their health care. But these numbers have real faces and real stories behind them. Real people in my state and every single state that my Republican colleagues represent who rely on Medicaid for life-saving care. We're talking about children who need Medicaid to see a doctor. We're talking about rural hospitals that without Medicaid would close. We're talking about people like my own mother who relied on Medicaid at the end of her life to pay for skilled nursing care. And this Republican budget is coming after that care, all to make sure that big corporations and people like Elon Musk and Donald Trump and their rich friends get new tax breaks, while Republicans either outright lie to the people or do Olympic-level mental gymnastics to try to explain how slashing Medicaid is somehow not slashing Medicaid. We are going to put their feet to the fire. If they claim they are not cutting Medicaid, okay, then show us. Show the kids who rely on Medicaid that you're not taking it from them. Show the seniors who rely on Medicaid that you aren't taking it from them. Show the people with disabilities who rely on Medicaid that you are not taking it away from them. Republicans have a real choice in front of them. And it's not too late to side with working families over their rich friends. The question is, who will the Republicans choose?
Senator Warren.
Thank you very much. We're going to talk about taxes. That's right. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the spineless Republicans in Congress have tried to create a sandstorm so that everyone will be distracted. There's something going on every minute, look in 50 different directions, because they don't want us to look at the number one place they are driving this country, and that is trillions of dollars in tax cuts for billionaires, paid for on the backs of seniors, on the backs of little kids, on the backs of veterans, and on the backs of everybody in America who is hoping that some medical research breakthrough will help a beloved family member who's dealing with a terrible disease. Don't believe us? Just listen to the Republicans themselves. During our last go-round on this budget, the Democrats stood up and said, if you're not going to do tax cuts for the wealthiest among us, let's just put that in the bill. Could we just write that down, put it in the bill, and say not going to be any tax cuts above this level? So we started out and we said, could we just agree in the United States Senate that no one who earns more than $10 million in taxable income in a single year, that is 2/1000ths of our population, that none of those people making more than $10 million in a year will see any tax giveaways in your budget. Every Democrat said yes. Every Republican said no. We got to preserve the ability to help those folks. So we said, okay, if $10 million is too low for you, those people are just too close to poverty to be able to promise they're not going to get any tax giveaways, how about $100 million in annual income? Once again, every Democrat said, yeah, let's put the cap there, and every single Republican voted no. So we said, okay, we get it. How about $500 million? If your income in a single year is $500 million or more, would you at least agree that those folks will not get a tax giveaway in the Republican budget? And every single Republican said, nope, got to preserve the opportunity to hand out those tax breaks for people making more than $500 million a year. So we decided to cap it off with a full billion. A full $1 billion in taxable incomes. Could we just agree as a United States Senate that anybody making $1 billion a year in taxable income will not get a big tax cut from the Republicans? And not one single Republican supported that. Every one of them said, nope, got to preserve the opportunity for tax giveaways for our billionaire friends. After all, let's remember, Donald Trump promised his, remember the word, rich as hell donors, that he was going to deliver on those tax giveaways. He's got his co-president Elon Musk in there, helping him right now grease the skids on that with all these cuts in the federal budget elsewhere. And that is where we stand. It's that families lose and billionaires win. Now, here's the trick in the game. They created a sandstorm hoping that we will be talking about 50 other things while they try to advance this budget over the next 36 hours. There's lots going on. There's tariffs, there's invading Greenland. Who knows what Donald Trump has done just while we've been standing up here. Why do that? Because the Republican approach is deeply unpopular. Not just unpopular with Democrats. It is deeply unpopular with Democrats, with Republicans, with independents, with libertarians, with vegetarians. In fact, the only people who really support this are the billionaires themselves. But most of America think that those billionaires should be paying a fair share in taxes. Most Americans believe that Jeff Bezos should not be paying taxes at a lower rate than a Boston public school teacher. So that's what the next 36 hours is all about. It's about the Republicans hoping that most of America won't notice what they're doing, and that is putting out a budget with trillions of dollars in tax cuts for billionaires, paid for on the backs of seniors, little kids, veterans, and everybody who wants to see America invest in our research future, our medical future. The Republicans hope that everybody will be looking everywhere else as they try to ram their unpopular plan through. The job of the Democrats over the next 36 hours is to hold the Republicans' feet to the fire, force them to tell the truth about what they want to do to the American economy and what they believe fairness is, and that is a country that works for a handful of billionaires and lets everybody else eat dirt. The Democrats are in this fight all the way. We're ready to go.
Ready to go.
Thank you.
Great. Senator Blumenthal on veterans.
Veterans and national security. I'm going to begin with a word that I told my children never to use, a four-letter word. D-U-M-B, dumb. These policies combine cruelty and incompetence in a way that is dumber than anything we've seen in recent history, maybe in the history of the United States. They will inflict pain. These tariffs are attacks on people who put food on the table, build homes, buy cars, have to purchase pharmaceuticals, but they also undermine our national security because they're imposed on our allies, on Europe, not on our adversaries or enemies as much as our friends, including, by the way, Israel. Now, on veterans, dumb applies with absolute force, because what we're seeing is a war on veterans. And we're going to hold our Republican colleagues accountable. The message that we are hearing from veterans around the country is they are rightly fearful about the cuts in funding, the freezes in hiring, the firings that are occurring and hitting our veterans in real time with real impact.
Excuse me, colleague. We're supposed to be the tech people.
And we're going to hold them accountable. We're going to be offering amendments that will force them to vote. Our Republican colleagues are dreading these next days because they're going to be put to the test. And those votes are going to haunt them because veterans know that they need the health care that comes at those hospitals like the West Haven facility in Connecticut, others around the country that are shortchanged. There are now 40,000 vacant positions at the VA. Surgeons, nurses, counselors, janitors, schedulers. 40,000 open positions, and they're recruiting, supposedly, for those positions. At the same time, they are firing people that hold those positions right now. Makes no sense. And so veterans around the country are demanding what the VFW commander demanded when he came before our committee: stop the bleeding. We're going to seek through this next couple of days to stop the bleeding in veterans programs. We're going to make sure that Republicans are forced to answer what is happening right now at the VA, where the bleeding threatens everyday veterans. We heard from a number of them yesterday at the shadow hearing we conducted. Right now, the Veterans Affairs Committee is not demanding that Doug Collins come and testify. We're going to demand that he do it. And we're going to demand that President Trump reverse these cuts, freezes, and firings that are causing such irreparable damage to veterans around the United States. And I'll just say, I think we owe the American people an apology, all of us who voted for Doug Collins. It was a mistake. I did it. I'm not repeating that mistake. I put a hold on all VA nominees. And I think part of what we're going to do is demand health care be protected, especially mental health care. No more cuts in the Veterans Crisis Line, and the PAC Act benefits that we supported in a bipartisan way, protect those benefits as well. So we're going to be out there working hard, and I want to introduce my great colleague, the senator from Oregon, the other senator from Oregon.
100% of Oregon senators are in the House. And my colleagues have said it very well. So here we are, 24 hours from the tariff announcement, which for farmers and families and small businesses is simply economic poison. And it is poison that is going to spread across the land, hammering families. Now we go to the next debate, and let me be blunt in terms of how I'm describing it to folks at home. We are going to see on full display by the Republicans for the American people a morally bankrupt bargain. That is my take on what this is all about. And no amount of gaslighting by the Senate Republicans can hide the true cost of what they're doing, the over $5 trillion, and the consequences of the breaks to the billionaires and making sure they get their way, that people on Medicaid and hunger programs and the like pony up the revenue. Now, the reality is these cuts that we're taking on tomorrow night are going to hit seniors and children like a wrecking ball from one end of the country to another. They're going to determine if your aging parents can be safe in a nursing home. I'm not kidding you. They're talking about cutting potentially staff. Mehmet Oz said, when I asked him, do you think there ought to be a nurse in a nursing home? He said, oh, that's complicated. I said, no, it's not complicated. I know you want to tell people who need help trying to get assistance in the night that somehow AI is going to work for them. But the reality is we Democrats know you got to have some nurses there 24/7 or people can die. So no amount of hiding behind the curtain, which is what we have seen in the Budget Committee, what we've seen in the Finance Committee, can hide the true cost of this tax plan where the handouts go to the billionaires and you pay for it by kicking millions of people off health insurance. In terms of American lives ruined and lost, the human toll of what the Republicans will inflict on America if they're allowed to get away with it is going to be horrific. And what you're hearing this afternoon is Senate Democrats are going to pull out all the stops to keep that kind of consequence from hitting the American people starting in a few days. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. First, the islands. They are the Heard and McDonald Island. They are covered by tariffs. Russia isn't. So basically, what Trump is doing is taxing penguins, not Putin. The only living things on those islands are the penguins are there. There are no people. Questions on this subject? Yes.
Senator Schumer, we saw Senator Booker take the floor for 25 hours and gave you and your conference quite a bit of attention to the issues that you care about. You have in front of you an opportunity here with Votorama to hold the floor as long as humanly possible to try and extend this out. How long are you willing to go to make your point?
You're going to see the points we made here and other points that Donald Trump, the Republican Senate, and the Republicans are having families lose, billionaires win. You'll see made in a whole bunch of different amendments on different subjects. Yes.
Senator, can you preview some of those amendments, and how many do you expect related to tariffs?
Well, you'll see them on the floor, and there will be amendments reflecting the tariff issue. Yes. Yes.
Just to follow up on Ryan's question, obviously, the Senator Booker's speech got a lot of attention.
It was great.
For being over 25 hours, will Democrats commit to
As I said,
25 hours?
you're going to see a whole lot of amendments going after Donald Trump and the Republicans on a whole bunch of issues where they are favoring billionaires and against families. Yes, Sahil.
If Republicans are able to succeed at using current policy baseline in this bill for reconciliation, what kind of precedent would that set and what might future majorities?
Look, first, I'm going to call on Jeff, our expert on this, but first, let me say this. The American people are not interested in the arcane aspects of reconciliation policy. They want to know how it affects them. What they're doing is a $37 trillion increase in the deficit. And why is it done? So they can cut taxes on billionaires. So that's the bottom line here, what it's doing. And not just what it's doing to America today, what it's doing to our children and our grandchildren in terms of this enormous, enormous debt that is going to be on their shoulders. And we all know, sooner or later, you pay the price for debt, and it will happen sooner than people think with the enormity of what they're doing. You want to get specific?
Sure. Absolutely. I want to emphasize again that one of the pillars in 1974, so from now over half a century, has been collectively we need to have integrity in the estimate of what any tax provision or policy provision would inflict in terms of cost or revenue. And thus we will depend on CBO. That's extremely important. So the Republicans said, well, we'll just create phony numbers to create a phony estimate and say all of these tax provisions that will increase and create $37 trillion of debt already existed far into the future, but they don't exist far in the future. That's why it's a fraud. That's why it's phony. That's why it's a deliberate deception to pretend to the American people they're not adding massively to the debt. So they thought, well, maybe we'll just put a clause into the budget resolution that says we'll use this fraudulent system. And then it became so clear that it was so out of sync with our precedents that they even withdrew it. Now, essentially, this conversation about integrity goes forward not on the budget resolution, but on the reconciliation bill. So we'll be well prepared to say it was fraud on the budget resolution. It's also fraud on the reconciliation bill.
Thank you,
Can I just add
everybody.
a bit of context here? You know, what I'm hearing from people in Connecticut is not reconciliation, it's not CBO, it's prices of gasoline and groceries. It's what will happen to my children's education. So I think that Senator Schumer and Senator Wyden make exactly the right point. We are going to reach American people at their pocketbooks, in their everyday lives, not with the kind of inside the beltway stuff that most people are focusing on here.
Thanks, everybody.
Feeling any pressure from the base